Hello, I'm Toycat, and this is a quick second channel video to talk about something I think is incredibly important. You might have heard of this story of the Defense Secretary, the Vice President, and many other key US figures having a signal chat where they shared super sensitive information, and the reason we know about that is because they accidentally added a reporter to this chat. There are lots of very spicy things in there, and people will jump on this as like, well, clearly this is US administration bad, and then stop analyzing the story. And some people jump aboard it and say, oh yeah, 53 people died in Yemen, including 5 children, and the response from these major officials in the realm of defense is great job, fist emoji, American flag, fire emoji. There is a compassionate side, there is a domestic US side, but I think there's a much more serious thing here, which comes from this message, which is shared at the top. I fully share your loathing of European freeloading, and it represents the huge divide that is happening between what was previously, perhaps you could argue, the two closest continents on Earth, North America and Europe. Between them represent the majority of the developed world. Between them represent over half of the world economy. That's amazingly impressive given it's about 1 billion of the world's 8 billion population. It is nutty how much goes on right here, and it's kind of nutty to see the United States going through what they're currently going through, because I'm just going to read messages from several key US figures, again, people who have been elected, even if indirectly, or appointed by someone who was elected, and again, we're going to ignore the angle if they shouldn't be using Signal, because again, they shouldn't be, but that's a US internal issue. The much more important thing is the fact that we have seen these messages, and behind closed doors, when they're just messaging each other, the Vice President says, man, yeah, if you think we're going to have to do this, we can do it, but I hate bailing out Europe again. His biggest concern with what's just gone down is that he feels like attacking Yemen, or rather preventing Yemeni people from attacking the shipping straits, is actually bailing out Europe. Just as a reminder, by the way, this is Yemen over here, this is Europe over there. There is some, obviously European shipping does go through here, arguably even more so because Europe is right over there, but it is an international shipping lane, which, benefits a lot of countries. I would particularly make an argument for lots of African nations, and in particular Asia. China, whenever they want to ship things to Europe, or indeed the same is true for India or Australia, this is a global shipping lane, and I guess you could just argue Europeans are the world's largest economy that benefits from it. But anyway, just as an interesting side note, let's come back to this. But yeah, he just wants to make his messaging tight, and the even more interesting response to that is that Pete Hegseth, who is apparently the US Defense Secretary, says, yeah, I share your loathing of European freeloading, it's pathetic, and then kind of makes the point that no one else can do it, and we're just going to do it because it's important. And what's even more interesting is the response from SM, who is theorized to be the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, says, as I heard it, the president was clear, green light, but we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement, e.g. if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the US successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. This is a very interesting kind of stance to take, I guess, and it kind of represents the wider view that is happening in the US. I've spoken to many, let's be honest, across the world, populism is on the rise, and that's, it's a thing that happens by itself, and there's a lot of people associate populism with easy two-word messaging and kind of vibe politics over actual policies. But I think that I've spoken to many actually intelligent United States of Americans, and a lot of those people will say, yeah, Europe kind of is freeloading on us, which is the core of this entire argument, right? The reason that the US is attacking Yemen and then going, those Europeans won't even pay to protect the shipping lanes again, the reason that that is happening is, broadly speaking, because of the fact that the US believes that they are fronting world defense, or at least NATO defense, while the rest of NATO kind of coast by on it. And I want to therefore take a second to look at this claim, because interestingly enough, yeah, if you look at you'll see a graph something like this, and it's super true. If you look at NATO defense expenditure, which is to say any country in NATO, if attacked, would defend every other country, basically the United States looks like it's fronting the entire alliance, right? The biggest claim to be in NATO is not that, oh, Spain will jump aboard you of their 1.24% of NATO expenditure, having France, Germany, and the UK on there is maybe a big deal, but let's be real, for countries like Montenegro, the biggest claim is, yeah, the US will come and back you up if you dare invade them, and so to the US, that looks like we are for free supporting all of these countries, because even, the UK, France, and Germany are still rounding errors compared to the US, and this is something that is very important and true, but I would say to any Americans who are like, yes, thank you, Toycat, you're finally talking about this, look at this graph, but then actually zoom out for a second. Zoom out to the world. This is from 2019, but you see the point that, like, yeah, the rest of NATO as a whole is only spending 304 billion US dollars a year on their defense, which, man, that actually does seem low when you really put it in perspective. But 304, like, even 732 is less than I would have expected, but I guess this was 2019. But $304 billion is low, but if it's low, then India or Russia or Saudi Arabia, even if all three came into an alliance, wouldn't be able to, you know, like, outspend the rest of NATO combined if the US decided not to get involved in that war. The rest of NATO could take on 75% of the world outside of these big four players, and isn't that kind of a shocking stat by itself? You know, you might think to yourself, like, yeah, we're spending so much money, so NATO should spend so much money, but the reason that the US is spending so much money is as a choice they have started making recently. If that choice is based on very important data because they know exactly what's happening, and in some cases, like, I think, you know, spending a lot of money in the Arctic does make sense. I think Norway, Sweden, Finland, the UK, especially Denmark maybe these days, should, and Canada too, should be spending more on defense if that is your case. But if your case is like, oh yeah, well, we're protecting the world and we expect you to protect the world too, there's an important note here that the US kind of unilaterally did decide to do this Yemen thing. Again, to be clear, they have worked, they've decided to attack the Houthis. Again, the actual situation with the Houthis in Yemen is a whole other video, but they've decided to attack the people that they believe are destabilizing shipping lanes, and by attacking those people, they've decided to just do it first and ask questions later. Literally in this case, they're like, oh yeah, later we have to work out what we can get in return for this. We've done something big, and now we expect people to pay us back. But here's the thing, you get to do that because you are the biggest spender. If your goal as the US is like, yeah, we think that Europe should spend more on our military, if the EU, let's just say the EU does, you know, join together, make a giant army, and that giant army just decides to double up their spending and, you know, match the USA, do you want a world where the US wants to do a thing, but actually now Europe gets to decide what it is? Do you want a world where, you know, like there's a Panama Canal issue, and instead of the US getting to jump in and, you know, claim the canal or whatever, Europe is like, don't worry, we got this. Hope you pay us back for our share, by the way, bro. I don't know that that's what you do want. I think that the broader problem, though, is that even if you think it is incredibly unfair, and I feel this, right? Looking at this chart, even if it's the best one you can make, it's still saying, yeah, the rest of NATO has a very similar population to the US, but they're spending about half as much, which is a problem, right? But part of that problem is that we're not trying to project as much. In the UK, we do, because, you know, notably, I think it is worth mentioning, if we can do whataboutism, which is my least favorite way to debate on the internet, but if we do a little bit of whataboutism, like, oh yeah, what was the most recent time a NATO member was attacked? I can recall in the UK, we have a particularly spicy crisis involving the Falklands. It's been coming up again more and more recently because the Falkland Islands are a territory that another country would really like, even to this day. The interesting response from that, by the way, is if you want to look into the very current situation, Argentina has basically said, like, yeah, ultimately speaking, you know, like, even though we would like to have it, it's probably not going to happen too soon. In 2024, the new president, who is a big fan of Margaret Thatcher, which is a spicy topic over there, but yeah, basically they expressed general acceptance and tolerance for the rule. But in 1980, that wasn't the stance. The Argentina decided to invade what was a part of the UK at the time, and who got involved on the UK's side here? I don't see the US. Like, you know, surely as the country which supports self-determination of the people involved, surely the US is in here somewhere. Maybe they got the flags wrong or something. You know, anyway, sorry, that's my petty whataboutism for this moment right here. Oh yeah, surely the rest of NATO also got involved. Oh, it looks like not. It looks like the only actual friends that we have in this were like New Zealand, Australia, and France vaguely declared an embargo, so that's kind of nice, whereas the US just kind of said, oh, you should have considered diplomatic options. And so what if Europe goes, oh yeah, well, you should have considered diplomatic options with the Houthis. What about that? Why are you killing children first and asking questions later? So yeah, there's my whataboutism done for the second. Anyway, the important thing in this video is the fact that I think that Europe and North America, or Europe and the United States, let's be honest, I think Canada is maybe on Europe's side for this one. I think that us falling apart is not a good thing. I think in the same way that my view on Russia is very controversial, because I think that, yeah, it would be better if we can, as we cut off Russia and we sanction them more and we take more of their assets, we are making it increasingly unlikely they will ever join, the free world, the capitalist, Western, global North world order, whatever you feel like calling it. As we make that less and less likely, the same thing happens between Europe and the United States. As we slowly but surely come to arms more and more, as slowly but surely more and more weird things happen. The number of European countries that have started to declare travel advisories on the US, the fact that Canada had to do that, right? Having to be like, just so you know, you gotta make sure you watch out or you might be detained at the border. It's something that is a concern. It's something that you probably don't want. I think that having friendly relations with a bunch of countries is an important thing. And if you lose sight of the idea that, like, well, if we, sure, we could be friends with these people, but otherwise, imagine if we could get the NATO spending up from 300 to 400, that would save us $100 billion. It's just important to note that you don't actually save yourself money. When you spend money on defense, which is what we call it, if money was purely spent on defense, if there's just a bunch of, turrets and a bunch of, anti-air missiles in the United States, then sure, that's one thing, right? But a lot of defense is about global power projection, and in exchange for not really having, Montenegro is in NATO, but it doesn't really get to project its power beyond the Montenegrin borders, whereas the United States does. And that is a power that you don't actually necessarily want to take away unless you're desperate to get economic concessions, unless you're desperate to have people pay for your military that you still decide on. But that is the crucial thing, right? I don't know. It's something that is worth having a discussion about. And if you are from the US and you consider yourself being an intelligent voter, I think you should at least consider, in the same way that Europeans should seriously consider how much do we want to spend on defense, and hopefully we increase those numbers, I think United Statesians need to consider themselves, is it worth potentially alienating our closest 20 to 30 friends for a small chance that those 20 to 30 friends spend a bit more on defense, given that when they spend more on defense, all it means is we project our power less. The reason the United States decided to up their defense spending is not to defend the US mainland. The US mainland would be defended at $300 billion, $200 billion. The US could could freeload off the rest of NATO's defense spending, right? You could cut your military budget by 3/4, spend a bunch of money on, I don't know, healthcare, homeless people, whatever weird cause you want to pick on right now, right? You could decide to do that, and you would be perfectly defended by the rest of NATO. Why aren't you doing that? And there's probably a good reason underneath it. Anyway, yeah, this was a vibes video, wasn't it? Yeah, vibe. It's been a while since we've had a vibes video, which is why, if I can end this video with a last vibe, as tragic as what happened in Kosovo was, I think that was the last time that NATO was truly united, as we were like, man. By the way, we invaded just to play the other side of this. I think Serbia still hates the Western world order, whatever, for this, because what was at the time Yugoslavia, just call it Serbia to keep your life simple. Serbia and Montenegro, actually, if we want to really bring Montenegro back into this. But Serbia and Montenegro had a part of their country that started just deciding they wanted to be independent unilaterally. However, they started committing war crimes against those people, and so you better believe all of NATO, look at this, jumped right aboard the side of Kosovo, and that's why Kosovo's an independent country. But feeling like we were stopping war crimes from happening by going in and being the heroes as a collective alliance, it's something we need again. And so I'm just saying, if any country out there, it can't be Russia because they've got nuclear weapons, if any country out there is willing to let a small part of their territory secede from the rest of it and then commit war crimes against them, we could bring NATO back together. Make NATO great again. That is my pledge for this video. And yeah, I also want to finish the video by saying, yeah, I think it is a special situation that Europe and North America can be as close as they are. And I hope that we keep moving in that direction, or I hope we stop moving away from that direction. I think I always talk about the UK and how nuts it is. Again, this is the AUKUS treaty, by the way. The UK, the US, and Australia have a fun treaty where we agree to do all sorts of fun things with nuclear submarines. But what's really unique about this is, like, yeah, on a globe, if you were to make a historical a fantasy map of the world, and having three countries that far away, the alliance wouldn't make any sense to anyone. But it totally makes sense on planet Earth, and I think that's cool. I love that the Anglosphere exists, but I also have to say, as someone who particularly isn't a part of the EU anymore, I think the EU and North America, we need to work our stuff out, right? We need to all come together and be like, oh yeah, between us, we can run this, you know, between us, we can stop the world going through some bad stuff. Between us, we can stop a genocide happening. Let's do stuff like that again, rather than whatever the heck is going on right now. That's my hot take. Anyway, thank you for watching. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.